Welcome to the Julie Briggs Show on WMTR 1250 AM, a Beasley Media Group station, brought to you by www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey. Streaming live on WMTRAM.com and TalkStreamLive.com.
A stopgap measure keeps the government funded for now. Joining my political roundtable this morning, former U.S. Congressman Leonard Lance, attorney, Republican. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Julie.
Former Senator Raymond Lesniak with the Lesniak Institute, Army veteran, Democrat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
Dr. Zenon Christodoulou, New Jersey Board of Utilities Commissioner, Democrat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. Good morning to everyone.
And John Van Fleet, columnist for InsiderNJ.com, independent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
The House and Senate agreed to a new stopgap measure to fund the government. It is a two-step bill, and it does not include supplemental funding for Israel, Ukraine, and the southern border. Congressman Lance.
I would have voted for it, Julie, and it received bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. And indeed, in the House, I believe virtually every Democrat voted for it, even though obviously it came to the floor as a Republican-sponsored bill. And it will mean that we will go through the holidays with funding for the government. And you have raised several critical issues that should be considered in a timely fashion. But given the fact that Congress is divided, one house controlled by Republicans, one by Democrats, I think that all of those responsible parties in Washington believed it was the best way forward for the immediate future. We obviously have to address these substantial issues early in the new year.
Senator Lesniak.
Well, I agree with Leonard as usual. Keeping the government open is first and foremost the most important thing. However, there are issues like aid to Ukraine, Israel, and the border that need to be addressed. Congressman, I'm surprised that the new speaker is given such leeway. If Speaker McCarthy did this with a majority of Democrats and not a majority of Republicans voting for it, he would have been dragged out and tarred and feathered by some of the members there.
I agree completely with that, Ray, and this is similar to the legislation that Kevin McCarthy brought to the floor and passed several months ago. And the fact that the new speaker is being given leeway is an interesting fact to note. And I would imagine it's because he's more conservative, certainly than Kevin McCarthy, and a good deal more conservative than I am. And one wonders how long the honeymoon will last with the most conservative element of the Republican caucus in the House. But apparently the honeymoon did exist for this period of time. The new year brings, however, these significant challenges.
How confident are you that a full budget can pass in January, Dr. Christodoulou?
Well, I think the biggest issue here is just how Congress is so divided on these very basic and essential issues. In funding of the government is critical. So just about the honeymoon with Johnson now, I mean, Kevin McCarthy tried this exact same thing in September, and he was ousted in many ways because of it. So there is a little honeymoon going on. I hope that they can prolong it because our country needs some good feeling somewhere coming out of Washington. But as long as there's this separation and this division within the Republican Party, for example, between the very staunch conservatives and the populists, I think they're going to find reasons to obstruct even these fundamental things of funding our government. In terms of will we get a full budget passed, Julie, they're going to break this into this two-step process in January and February, and the January spending will prioritize certain things like military construction, veterans affairs, housing and energy, and then in February they'll take up everything else. I would suspect that the January part, because they are such high priorities, this January first step of that two-step process will be passed, and then the real battle will be the everything else basket that we'll see in February. So I don't think we're out of the woods with this at all. I think that we will see more division, and I think that unfortunately we'll be dragged into a very perilous spot. You know, we use that word perilous a lot of times in the fall when we were talking about what would happen if the government stops funding things. And I hope we don't come perilously close again. There's a presidential election coming up, as we know. In January, February, we'll be right in the thick of the primaries and caucuses, and that process is going to turn this into even more of a circus than it is already.
How long do you think Speaker Johnson will last, John Van Fleet?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, Julie, but I think that because nothing has fundamentally changed within the arrangement of the Congress or the House itself, I imagine that it's safe to say he's probably on borrowed time. But how much time exactly, I couldn't tell you. I think he might last longer than his predecessors, but I would be surprised if he stays in there for the long haul.
A heated argument in the Senate nearly turned into a fistfight before Senator Bernie Sanders intervened.
If you want to run your mouth, we can be two consenting adults. We can finish it here.
Okay, that's fine. Perfect.
You want to do it now?
I'd love to do it right now.
Well, stand your butt up then.
You stand your butt up.
Oh, hold on.
Big
No,
guy.
no, stop it.
Is that your solution every
Hold it. No, sit down. Sit down.
Look at you.
You know, you're a United States Senator. Sit down.
Active.
Oh, okay.
Sit down, please.
All right.
Can I respond, Mr.
Hold
Chairman?
it. Hold it. If
Hold
we
on.
can't, no,
This is
I have
what
the
he
mic.
said.
I'm sorry.
This is
Hold
what
it.
he said.
You'll have your time.
Okay.
Can I respond?
Oh, no, you can't. This is a hearing. And God knows the American people have enough of contempt for Congress. Let's not
I don't
make
like
it worse.
thugs and bullies. And that's what-
I don't like you because you
Hold
just
it.
described yourself.
Hold it.
Congressman Lance, what has happened to decorum in the Senate?
It was a committee. I know Mark Wayne Mullen quite well. He is a newly minted United States Senator from Oklahoma. He served in the House, and we served on the same committee together, the Energy and Commerce Committee. And he's feisty. However, I also think that the president of the Teamsters, Sean O'Brien, is feisty. And I believe Sean O'Brien called Senator Mullen cowboy. And so I'm not going to take sides necessarily, but my own view is that there was fault on both sides. Bernie Sanders did an excellent job in calming the situation. And I think it's a good thing that both houses of Congress are on recess during Thanksgiving week, because Congress was in session and it was time for the members in both the House and the Senate to go home to their families. And I believe that cooler heads will prevail once both houses of Congress come back into session to work on important public issues in December.
Senator Lesniak, I heard you laughing.
Well, as someone who almost came to blows with Senator Doherty on the floor of the Senate in New Jersey, I can't be critical. And actually seeing this happen makes me realize how silly I was in responding in the way I did. So it's a lesson learned. And as I said, I can't be critical. It's certainly something I should not have done. But Senator Doherty deserved it.
He's been on the show too, so he's a good person. Dr.
Oh, he's a
Chris
friend. He's
Dudu.
absolutely a friend. We just got into a heated argument when we shouldn't have.
Julie, let me say that
Yes.
Mike was in the assembly when I was in the state senate. We were running mates, and he's doing an excellent job now as surrogate of Warren County. He voluntarily decided to leave the state legislature, and now he's in Belvedere, the county seat of Warren County, as surrogate. And the reason I raise that is because we were running mates. And again, Mike is feisty the way Mark Wayne Mullen is feisty. But I'm quite protective of surrogates these days, because at the moment, my wife, Heidi Rohrbach, is the surrogate elect of Hunterdon County.
And she is wonderful.
I think so.
Dr. Chris Dudu.
Thanks, Julie. And gentlemen, thank you. I think this is one of the funniest things I have seen in a long time. I mean, quite frankly, those guys are morons. And Congressman Lance, I'm almost afraid that Senator Mullen is going to go home, and with his temperament, his feisty temperament, I hope he doesn't beat up one of his 6 kids. And if they're too slow to pass the cranberry sauce, he's going to take them outside. I mean, this is inexcusable. It really is. There's absolutely no circumstance where something like this should be permitted, excused, or anything. I mean, he's a senator of the United States, for God's sakes. And he said that he wants to take out some guy anywhere, anytime. And he even gave a specific date at an April charity event. He wants to challenge this guy to a steel cage match, which is just bizarre. And then he calls him a thug and then says he has no respect for him. I mean, look, if you're walking down an escalator in the dark and somebody trips into you and you have a flash of emotion and a heat of passion for a second, this was a protracted, prolonged exchange between two people who have the physical stature of adults, but the mentality of an adolescent neophyte. I just can't imagine how they take a discussion on an economic panel and turn it into a potential steel cage match that Bernie Sanders has to officiate. I can't wait to see some of the Saturday Night Live replays to see how they portray these two morons representing the United States in Washington, D.C. It's bizarre. It's great TV. It's comical, inexcusable, and I'm unapologetic of my criticism for two children like that.
Changing gears, the Senate has had it with Senator Tuberville's blockade on military promotions. Here is Chuck Schumer.
There's been a lot of negativity and dysfunction in the Senate these days, but Senator Tuberville has single-handedly brought the Senate to a new low. He should be ashamed of himself. Patience is wearing thinner and thinner with Senator Tuberville on both sides of the aisle. What Senator Tuberville is doing is an anomaly in the history of this chamber. Of course, every single one of us, not just Senator Tuberville, has issues we feel passionately about. We're certain we are right, as he is in his anti-abortion stand. Every one of us could go and block all of our generals, all of our admirals, harm our military security, because we feel passionately and want to put our views above the views of the rest of the chamber and of the American people in this case. And what would happen? We'd have no military, basically. None. Our national security would be at risk, severe risk, and our way of life would change.
John Van Fleet, do you think they will be successful in getting around him?
Julia, I don't know exactly what methods that they will use, but I'm sure that they will find a way to circumvent his obstructionism. I remember in a previous show we talked about this. I'd said that if Tuberville isn't getting paid by the Kremlin, he really missed an opportunity here to do some incredible damage to our national security apparatus. And Senator Schumer said that it's unprecedented in the history of the Senate. I think that, patience will wear thin, and these are just things that can't be put off forever. And these are things that are of critical importance. And I am fully confident that he'll be circumvented by hook or by crook in time.
Congressman Lance, do you think it's unusual that one senator can throw up this blockade?
Yes. And it's technically possible to do it, obviously, because the senator is doing it. But I agree with the panel that this will be circumvented. And Alabama is a strong military state. And I think this could hurt the senator politically because of the situation regarding jobs in the military, for example, in Alabama, and a potential opponent. And it wouldn't necessarily be a Democratic opponent. It could be an opponent in a Republican primary who could point out that this is harmful not only to the nation as it is, but also in particular to the state of Alabama. Whereas I think the much less serious matter of Markwayne Mullin will actually be helpful to him politically in Oklahoma. That would be my judgment as a matter of raw politics. I think this could be harmful to Senator Tuberville. And you quoted the majority leader. I also think the minority leader, Senator McConnell, will become involved in this probably sooner rather than later, and that this will be resolved successfully for the nation as a whole.
Julie, if I may, I really want to comment on this. It's Senator Lesniak, Ray Lesniak now. What Senator Schumer should do is introduce a resolution stripping Tuberville of his courtesy powers and put it up for a vote. This has gone too far, too long, and it's hurting our military, and it's time to take that step. I'm sorry about the House of Lords and their rules. There comes a time when those rules have to be changed for the good of the country.
A scathing ethics report provides substantial evidence that George Santos has committed crimes.
No, I don't think lying is excusable ever. I earlier said it, that I thoroughly apologize for lying about my education and embellishing the resume. I've made that very, very clear. I don't know what more can be said. I can guarantee you that from now on, anything and everything is always going to be above board. It's largely always been above board. I'm just going to go the extra step now to double check, cross-reference everything.
Dr. Zenon Christodoulou.
Well, as long as he's sorry, I mean, how much can you give this guy? It's absolutely another comedy sketch. You know, when he was first elected and people revealed some things about his resume that weren't just embellishments. I mean, embellishment is one thing, you know, you win the World Series, you really meant you won a baseball game. Okay. But this was a complete fantasy world. This was like he hallucinated certain things about his life that he put down on paper and stuck to it. He got caught and then said, okay, won't happen again. And now we find out all of his expenditures. You know, it really would be funny if it weren't so sad. And the seriousness of this is that people have lost all faith in government. And people like Senator Mullen threatening to beat somebody up, and Santos, who doesn't seem to know where reality ends and fantasy begins, or laws end and illegal funding mechanisms begin. You know, this is terribly detrimental to our system. And we have great elected leaders all with us today on the program, and they were and are above board. They understand the responsibilities that they had. And I think we're losing that. And as a byproduct, democracy has a real obstacle here. Without the will of the people supporting elected leaders and the process, it doesn't stand a chance to survive. And these people that we've described today in Washington are really taking us further from that goal of keeping a unified populace that believe in their system. I think George Santos, I can't wait to see the movie come out in a couple of years. It's going to be hilarious. I don't think they could find an actor. It'll have to be some AI like generated figure because he's all over the place.
John Van Vliet, George Santos will not be seeking re-election, and there is a new motion to expel him.
Well, I think that's a great disappointment for all of us who enjoy the comedic show that is the Congress. I am a little bit sorry to see that the Senate didn't break out into a 19th century duel or brawl, because that would have made C-SPAN something people want to watch again. But I do find it that Dr. Christodoulou really hits the nail on the head with his assessment here. You know, first time to try to throw him out doesn't fail, but everybody knows the guy is crooked as hell, so we'll try again to throw him out. But I think Liz Cheney had said it very well. She said we have to stop electing idiots, and that's our problem. We have too many legitimate idiots in our government, and it erodes the faith in democracy. We need to be an example as a global leader to other countries. We want to project moral authority, but we've got a clown show going on. And the sad thing is, as was previously said, they're powerful people whose actions have real consequences with our lives, and not only American lives, but also those around the world. Personally, I would be delighted to see Santos retire from his position. I know he said that he was honest before, but he's going to be extra honest now. I mean, what more assurance do we need?
And Congressman Lance.
I'm very proud of the House Ethics Committee, which released the report. I'm the only New Jerseyan to have served on an ethics committee on Capitol Hill in the last 30 years. The House Ethics Committee on which I served, by appointment of Paul Ryan, has 10 members, 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats. It is the only completely bipartisan committee in the House of Representatives. And I would not have voted to expel before the report of the House Ethics Committee. Indeed, the House Ethics Committee members did not vote yay or nay on the first expulsion. They voted present, which is what they should have done, and it is what I would have done. And now that the House Ethics Committee has released its report to the American people, the chairman of the committee, Michael Guest of Mississippi, has placed on the floor a motion to expel the congressman. And I would vote for expulsion now that the House Ethics Committee has done its work. And I commend the committee, the 10 members, Chairman Guest, and the ranking Democrat is Susan Wild, who is the neighboring member of Congress from where I live in Hunterdon County. She represents the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. Chairman Guest and ranking member Wild have worked together on this issue. And I think the Long Island congressman is much outside the mainstream. Most members of the House of Representatives, and I dare say this is true in the Senate as well, most members of the House of Representatives are intelligent, hardworking, very able representatives of their districts across America. And I defend the House of Representatives in its entirety, and I defend most of the members. And it is based upon the excellent work of the House Ethics Committee that we are where we are. And I predict that there will be a significant vote to expel Congressman Santos. I don't know whether it will pass. I think it's much more likely to pass now that the committee has done its excellent work. And whether or not it passes, and I hope it does, he, of course, is not running for re-election, and he will be out of office a year from now and perhaps sooner than that.
And it is bipartisan. We have to go to a break. I'm Julie Briggs. We'll be right back.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Julie Briggs Show, brought to you by www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back. Donald Trump is under fire for his comments comparing political rivals to vermin.
The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within. We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
Is this cause for concern, Congressman Lance?
Language is much too strong, and I criticize it as heavily as I can. And as I've stated on this program before, I hope he is not the Republican nominee for president in 2024. And I think the other candidates should coalesce around one candidate. And I would imagine that should be Nikki Haley, based upon her performance so far in the debates. But there has to be a coalescing around an alternative in the singular, not the plural.
Senator Lesniak.
Well, this is typical Donald Trump. He seems to be getting worse, if that's possible. I do believe he incites to riot. His rhetoric saying, if you beat an opponent of mine up, I'll pay for your legal fees. He's just a blight on the United States of America. And the sooner we get rid of him, the better.
Zenon Christodoulou.
Donald Trump has been rewarded for every outlandish thing he said and everything he does. And that's why I'm afraid he has no incentive to stop. His poll numbers keep going up. The more indictments against him, he gets more popularity. The more ridiculous comments like they're vermin, and the more he creates this us versus them tribalism, the higher his poll numbers go. So he's actually being rewarded for things that many of us find morally reprehensible. So I don't know when he stops. And with the 43% approval rating, or people that will firmly vote for him, I don't see how we derail that unless, as Congressman Lance suggested, that there's a coalescence around a candidate. And I tend to agree. I think Nikki Haley has done a great job, not just in the debates, but her career has been very successful. And I think that she brings a lot of great ideas, and she'll be able to motivate a lot of people, not just in an election, but also if she were president. I think she would do a great job. I think it'll be a great debate with her and Joe Biden in the general election. So, I mean, this is no surprise that Donald Trump is going to escalate attacks of all sorts and encourage all sorts of bad behavior, because he himself is rewarded for that. And people don't stop things that they're rewarded for.
This is Chris Christie responding to Donald Trump.
Not only is it awful, but it is reminiscent of the worst language used in Nazi Germany during the 30s. And look, I mean, I'm used to this guy doing this stuff. I mean, you know, the Florida Republican Party, 10 days ago or so, he got on the stage because I had criticized him in a speech that I'd been there earlier in the day and, you know, called me a fat pig. I mean, you know, this is a guy who there's nothing he won't say or do if you don't kiss his rear end.
John Van Fleet, how do you think Chris Christie is doing in the campaign?
I think Chris Christie is very unlikely to become the nominee, but I think Christie is an important voice in this debate. And I think it's important that he is there holding some accountability to Donald Trump specifically. He's not afraid to speak the truth on how he has behaved and to try to bring back a little sensibility. Congressman Lance had said before that he hopes that it coalesces around another candidate, and I would agree with that. I think that Christie or Haley would be good, but for the future, the precedent is set. There will be more Vivek Ramaswamis. There will be more fringy lunatics who are given a pass, as Dr. Christodoulou has said, that they don't suffer particularly for making outrageous comments like this because there is no longer a bottom. There is no longer a sense of, like, you know, you just don't go there. Now, that's too far because it gets attention. When they understand that it gets attention, and that's all that matters. You can say the most outlandish things, but words have power. And words spoken on stage will translate into actions by somebody somewhere. And I think it's dangerous, the kind of rhetoric that's being used. And I'm glad that Chris Christie is out there saying as much. He's a tough guy. He's not afraid. You know, and in some respects, you know, he is Trump-like with his aggressiveness, but he's not barbaric at the same time. He knows the value and respect accorded to an office, and I'm glad that he's up there on stage.
Tammy Murphy announced her run for Menendez's New Jersey Senate seat. How do you think she will do, Congressman Lance?
I think she may do very well, Julie. So far, she's getting support from major entities in the Democratic Party, and the voter-rich counties in a Democratic primary are moving in her direction. And if she were to be nominated, and I would imagine she is the leader at the moment, she would have an excellent chance of being elected next November. And the reason I say that is that we Republicans have not elected a United States Senator from New Jersey since Clifford Case's election to a fourth term in 1972, more than 50 years ago. And he was initially elected, I think, in 1954, so we've not elected an initial senator since 1954. The record is not strong for my side. And so if Mrs. Murphy is nominated, and it seems to be going in that direction, I think she would be the heavy favorite to be our new United States Senator come January of 2025.
Senator Lesniak, do you agree?
I totally agree. The governor has done a great job lining up organization support for Mrs. Murphy. She's a good advocate. She doesn't have the record of running for office or taking tough positions, but that's how New Jersey politics works. You know, some of us have been victims of that, to say the least, but that's politics. And I think she'll be our nominee. And as Congressman Lance said, likely be our senator. And I'm sure she'll do a good job there.
Dr. Christodoulou, were you surprised by the results of the New Jersey election?
Well, actually, I think we were all taken by surprise a little bit. We had anticipated much closer races in key areas of the state, and there were a couple of things leading up to Election Day that we thought would tip it even further away from incumbent Democrats. But my goodness, I think the results speak for themselves, and the people have spoken loudly on these issues, and I think the Democrats should be very happy. The League of Municipalities just last week down in Atlantic City, where everybody gets together to collaborate on thoughts for the next year, showed a lot of great enthusiasm in the Democratic ranks because they did so well. And in terms of our upcoming U.S. Senate race, I think it presupposes that Senator Menendez will not be able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that $40 every other week could lead to enormous sums of cash. I think if he can do that, then we may be having a different conversation. But in the absence of that, I think First Lady Tammy Murphy will do a terrific job as a candidate and as an elected official. She's traveled around with her husband, and she's really developed her own brand, her own style, her own abilities, and I think she will be an excellent representative. And the timing actually couldn't have been scripted better. The last year of a governor's tenure leading into the first year of your spouse's tenure in a different elected position. I mean, it's like from central casting scripted so well. So it'll be interesting to see how that works.
Congressman Lance, will the result shape what's happening in 2024?
The Democrats control the legislature, and now they control it by slightly healthier margins, both houses. And I don't think that it will have a direct impact on the 2024 race, which is a national race for president, obviously, for United States Senate in New Jersey, and for the 12 House districts in New Jersey. And so it may be a harbinger that this is a Democratic state. Democrats have 1 million more registered voters than we Republicans do, but I don't think that is surprising. From my perspective, all of the congressional districts are gerrymandered in this state, except my district, the 7th district, which is highly competitive. But I can today give you the results in 11 of the 12 congressional districts in New Jersey. We Republicans will retain Chris Smith and Jeff Van Drew, and the Democrats will retain all of the other seats. And then the only contested seat will be here in District 7. And then let me repeat that regarding the United States Senate race, whoever is nominated by the Democrats in June, and I presume it will be Mrs. Murphy, whoever that candidate is, will be the heavy favorite in the November election. And the Democratic candidate for president is likely to carry New Jersey in the presidential race. The Republicans have not elected a Republican here in New Jersey since the senior George Bush in 1988. None of this makes me happy, Julie, but I am reporting the factual situation.
Senator Lesniak.
Yeah, I do want to mention something that Leonard had mentioned in terms of gerrymandering. What we have in New Jersey is a unique form of gerrymandering. We have incumbent gerrymandering. Whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, we make sure that they're in safe districts. And that's unfortunately been our redistricting posture, and that is incumbent protection, not Democrat or Republican, but protect the incumbents, which is not good for our democratic process because you don't have a good give and take of ideas during an election.
John Van Fleet.
I think that the points just made cover it pretty thoroughly. I would invite Congressman Lance to InsiderNJ. He's put me out of a job now for the next couple of years. So,
No, I enjoy reading you, John, and you do a much better job than I could possibly do.
Oh, thank you.
What we have here is a mutual admiration society.
Not like Mark Wayne Mullen in Washington.
No, not
sure.
at all. We have to go to a break. I'm Julie Briggs. We'll be right back.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Julie Briggs Show, brought to you by www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back. Israel is conducting a controversial ground raid on Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza. Here is Benjamin Netanyahu.
We entered that hospital with Arabic-speaking Israeli doctors, with incubators, and we had no firefight. But Hamas was using the patients in that hospital as a human shield. And on level -2, we found a command and control center, military communications, coded equipment. We found bombs. We found weapons. And we also found terror tunnels in the hospital compound. Now, we're doing this very gingerly because we're trying to do the moral thing, the right thing, to deprive Hamas of having this safe zone in a hospital, but at the same time to neutralize its use as a command center for terrorists.
Your response, Congressman Lance.
I have no reason to dispute what the Prime Minister said, Julie, and it's a terrible thing, and I recognize that, but I do not favor a ceasefire at this moment. I favor humanitarian pauses, and they are occurring. And let us recall that in World War II, we firebombed a good deal of urban Germany and of Tokyo. War is a terrible thing, but this is brought about because of the horrific action of Hamas.
Do you think the hostages will be released?
Yes, I believe the hostages will be released. I think that negotiations are occurring, especially with the government of Qatar. And so, yes, I think the hostages will be released, and certainly I hope that they will be released.
Senator Lesniak.
Well, Leonard makes a good point. We dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan and killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. War is difficult. People get killed in war. And that's my biggest problem with Netanyahu. I mean, he could have avoided, I don't want to say that, but he has not been helpful at all in making peace in the area, supporting a 2-state solution, not allowing the settlements on the West Bank. He has not been helpful. But in terms of war, war is war, and innocent people are going to be killed. I just hope it's held to a minimum.
Dr. Krista Dulu.
Well, of course, we understand all the horrors of war. But one of the things that history has shown us, even Karl von Clausewitz said this 150 years ago, the first casualty of war is the truth. And what we're facing now with social media and so many of the things that we're looking at is a war of public opinion. And this is something I believe that everybody involved over there has to be very aware of. And I believe they are to some degree. We see what's happening in college campuses. We see what happens even now. We were talking earlier about the 2-step plan for the budget and not including additional aid to Ukraine and Israel because of certain views that people have based on public opinion. And Congressman Lance, although you say you have every reason to believe Bibi Netanyahu, and I do too, except for a BBC report that says that the IDF's claims about the infrastructure beneath Al-Shifa Hospital, the BBC says that it was not the elaborate nerve center that the IDF said it was, in addition to the fact that they seem to have evidence, it needs to be verified, but the BBC was in that hospital and took videos and pictures of the cache of weapons that the IDF said they found hours later, which seems to have doubled in size. So the BBC is looking into this to see whether something was manipulated to make their claims a little bit more bold. So I'm very concerned that as people are trying to create this global perception of one way or the other, that this can get even further out of hand. And I'm very worried that we are nowhere near understanding or collectively agreeing globally which side needs to prevail and what the reasons were and how much we're going to support. The funding will be an issue, public support will be an issue, and it's driving people against each other in places like London and Paris and Berlin and Washington, where they're having these big rallies based on different perceptions of what they see the truth is. So I'm very concerned, and I hope the BBC report comes out to show that there was no manipulation, but we don't know that yet.
John Van Fleet. President Biden met with President Xi of China last week.
I just concluded several hours of meetings with President Xi, and I believe there were some of the most constructive and productive discussions we've had. First, I'm pleased to announce that after many years of being on hold, we are restarting cooperation between the United States and PRC on counter-narcotics. In 2019, you may remember, China took action to greatly reduce the amount of fentanyl shipped directly from China to the United States. But in the years since that time, the challenge has evolved from finished fentanyl to fentanyl chemical ingredients and pill presses. Secondly, and this is critically important, we're reassuming military-to-military contacts, direct contacts. As a lot of you press know who follow this, that's been cut off, and it's been very worrisome. That's how accidents happen, misunderstandings. And thirdly, we're going to get our experts together to discuss risk and safety issues associated with artificial intelligence.
What are your thoughts on this meeting?
I think it's a great step. I think it's a very positive development for the Biden administration, but also for the world itself. When you have two giant superpowers, such as the U.S. and China, able to break down a little bit of the tension that has existed, can only be a net positive. And when he was talking about resuming direct military communication, that's really critical, especially when you see the situation in the South China Sea, the conflict over the Spratlys and conflicting claims for territorial waters and Taiwan. This is not the time when you want to be posturing and putting your fingers in your ears because you don't want to listen to the other guy. Having sort of an equivalent of a red telephone, as it were, is critical. And I'm glad to see that that development has been made. He mentioned talk on narcotics. Fentanyl is a huge problem around the world, and artificial intelligence. China as a huge cyber power in the world. We think of it as a manufacturing and an agrarian power, but they also have, by virtue of their state apparatus and population, a significant amount of sway over what happens online. The debate goes on about TikTok, but other issues with hacking and confronting the dark web and its actors, propaganda, misinformation, and the use of AI as a potential weapon of misinformation is all going to become incredibly important and prominent in the very short term. So I think that certainly it's a positive development for everybody, and the Biden administration should be proud, but I think the United States should be proud too.
Congressman Lance.
I agree with John completely. Talking is better than not talking. And the crucible, of course, is if China were to invade Taiwan, and let's hope that the discussions led to a recognition to a greater extent than before the discussions that this would be an enormously serious event if China were to do that. And I'm sure that President Biden directly or indirectly made that point. And President Biden and the Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, should be congratulated for what occurred in the discussions in San Francisco.
So I'd like to add something about the Biden and President Xi meeting. And I agree, John, that it may have reduced tensions, but it will not reduce the rivalry. And it's not just rivalry on a local scale. They're talking about global dominance, not just global influence, but actually global dominance. Both China and the United States are committed to leading the world. And we know what that means. We've led the world since the last century. And I think China wants to replace us. We can't lose sight of that fact. And I think Joe Biden, perhaps in a moment of honesty, when he said that President Xi was, in fact, a dictator, more importantly than the statement was the cringe that Tony Blinken made after the president said that. Now, that may have been a moment of honesty that he may not have wanted to reveal, but China is a completely different system. She is very close to a dictator. And in terms of the global implications of what may happen in Taiwan and the South China Sea, Taiwan is kept alive because of their chip manufacturing that the world so desperately needs. As we know, President Biden created the CHIPS Act to create a domestic-grown chips industry. China is doing the same thing. And I think in the 5 years that it may take to get those plants up and running to replace Taiwan, I think after that's done and after our supply chains are secured, I think all bets are off with Taiwan. I don't think the U.S. will go out of its way to defend an island next to China if they weren't the world's chip manufacturer. Once that status is removed, I think Taiwan could be very much on the table for China to invade, take over, or at least attempt it. And I think the world will do as little there, maybe even less, than they're doing it in Ukraine.
We do have to go to a break. Speed Round is next. I'm Julie Briggs.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Julie Briggs Show, brought to you by www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Speed Round is brought to you by Fairview Insurance Agency in Verona and Local 68 operating engineers in West Caldwell and Atlantic City.
Again, Speed Round is brought to you by John Graham, CEO and President of Fairview Insurance Company, Verona, New Jersey. First Speed Round question, 30 seconds or less answers. The new federal Supreme Court ethics code is backfiring in the face of widespread criticism for being unenforceable. What do you think of this, Congressman Lance?
I think it's a step in the right direction, and there was an editorial in the Washington Post which was not completely favorable, but it was more favorable than some of the editorials I have seen. And so I want to see how it works. Certainly, the Chief Justice and the other members of the court recognized that they had to do something, and time will determine whether it goes far enough. But my view is that it's a step in the right direction.
Senator Lesniak.
Yeah, I disagree with Leonard on this one. Too little, too late. The Senate isn't the House of Lords. The Supreme Court of the United States is. They have to get their own house in order, and they have to do a better job at it.
Dr. Krista Dulu.
If laws mean anything, and they need to mean the most in the Supreme Court, highest court in the land, so if laws mean anything, they can't have double standards. They have to be equal for everyone. It can't be between a certain class and another class. It can't be between elites and regular people. So if we need to start somewhere to preserve our legal status and the democracy, which is based on equality, then the best place to start is with the Supreme Court, and it needs to be as stringent as possible to lead by example.
John Van Fleet.
I would agree with that statement, and certainly in the case of the legislature, we can elect somebody else if we don't like the behavior of a person, or perhaps we'll see with the case of Santos that they can do their own housekeeping. But yes, the Supreme Court is not elected. They are entrusted with the faith and confidence of the people of this country to arbitrate in good faith and to behave. So I would agree with that assessment.
Next speed round question. Toll hikes are expected in January for New Jersey. Can New Jersey drivers afford another hike? Congressman Lance.
Regarding commercial traffic, of course, it will simply be made up in higher costs for various products. It is more challenging for drivers who are driving not in a commercial setting. And I would imagine that it's justified based upon that the funds are needed to continue a road to be improved.
Senator Lesniak.
Well, I'm not running for future office either, so I have to say that these toll hikes are necessary as much as we dislike having to pay them. And you know what? They brought John Corzine down as governor, so it's a sticky wicket for a politician, but roads have to be built, and infrastructure has to be improved, and I believe it's necessary.
John Van Fleet.
I think that most people get political when they have to pay for something, whether it's at the toll booth or at the gas station. That's when they become political experts for that moment, at least. I myself try to keep my traveling fairly limited compared to where it was, but I think that just in general, for regular toll traffic, unless you're commuting and you have to do that a lot, it's just something that you end up accepting and grinning and bearing. maybe not grinning, but you bear it. But certainly, as far as commercial traffic is concerned, that'll have an impact in rising prices for shipping. And I think, New Jerseyans more or less have accepted that you want to drive on the highways, you're going to have to pay for it.
Xenon Christodoulou.
Price increases of any kind are inflationary. And although commercial vehicles can pass it on to the consumers, which they'll pay in the form of higher prices, also inflationary. But what we've found is that non-commercial drivers, or people who just regular consumers of things, increased their salary demands, which then has more of an acceleration of the inflation process. It's in a spiral. So either they're going to demand more money in their salaries, which then raises prices, or they're going to reduce their discretionary spending because they can't spend it on the tolls and in the supermarket. And then it gets into an entire economic debate of which is a better money multiplier, more government spending or more private consumption. Of course, our roads desperately need the investments. It's just a matter of, as everybody recognizes, most citizens recognize, are we spending the money in the wisest way and in the most cost-effective way?
We do have to go to a break. More speed round when we return. I'm Julie Briggs.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Julie Briggs Show, brought to you by www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back. Last speed round question.
I've got plenty to be thankful for. I haven't got great big yard.
What are you most thankful for this Thanksgiving? Congressman Lance.
I'm most thankful to God, Julie, for my wonderful wife, Heidi, and my family. And I've been blessed with a great family, and I am grateful for that every day of the year, particularly on Thanksgiving. And of course, on Thanksgiving, which is a great national holiday, American holiday, first proclaimed by Abraham Lincoln. I am also thankful for living in the United States of America, which I believe, without a doubt, is the greatest country on earth.
Senator Lesniak.
Well, I do a gratitude meditation every day. So Thanksgiving in that regard is no different from any other day. However, something very important happened to me this week, and that is Congressman Smith and Congressman Norcross, Republican and Democrat, are introducing a resolution to help these 200 American families and 300 Ukrainian orphans get together after their adoption proceedings were suspended because of the war. This is very important to these families, to get these children, these orphans, a loving family to be with. And I think a Republican and Democrat are going to make this happen. I'm grateful for that.
Dr. Christodoulou.
Julie, of course, as everyone else, I'm so thankful for my family, for the country we live in, for the time we live in. But as I grow older every year, I tend to become more thankful in a reflective view that I understand the blessings that I have and my family has, and I appreciate those blessings more and more every year, and I'm thankful of that growth that I experience every year.
John Van Fleet.
Oh, of course, Julie, like everyone, I am very thankful for having a supportive family and good friends and having a roof over my head and a job which can bring me into contact with interesting people, such as those on this panel and yourself. And I'm also very appreciative and thankful grateful for where we live, and when so often we look on the news and we see so many terrible things that are going on around the world, that we have our own challenges here, but we are very fortunate to live here when we do and where we do, and I'm very grateful for that as well.
Our time has come to a close. I thank all my political roundtable guests this morning. Congressman Leonard Lance, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Julie. It's always a pleasure being with you and your other guests, and blessed Thanksgiving to everyone.
Senator Raymond Lesniak, thank you so
Okay.
much, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you and all of your listeners for a very, very happy Thanksgiving.
Dr. Zenon Christodoulou, thank you so much.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, everyone on this panel. I wish you all and your families a very happy Thanksgiving and a blessed holiday season.
John Van Fleet, thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, my fellow panelists here. Wishing everybody and their families a very happy Thanksgiving.
I'm Julie Briggs. For Jessie Frees and myself, we wish all our listeners a wonderful Thanksgiving.
I've got eyes to see with, ears to hear with, arms to hug with, lips to kiss with, someone to adore. How could anybody ask for more? My needs are small, buy 'em all, 5 and 10 cent store. Oh, I've got plenty to be thankful for.
Welcome to the Jessie Frees Show on WMTR 1250 AM, a Beasley Media Group station. Brought to you by www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey. Streaming live on WMTRAM.com and TalkStreamLive.com.
I'm Jessie Frees. How close are we to losing the America we love? For all of us who deeply value democracy, we now find ourselves at an unprecedented critical moment in time. We seem to be ascending at a fast pace from democracy to autocracy. And if we don't put the brakes on now and stop the descent before it is too late, the 2024 election could well be our last. We could find ourselves under authoritarian rule and under a leader like dictators, President of China Xi and Putin, who rule with iron fist authority for life. Could this happen here? My special guest today, the esteemed David Pepper, author of the must-read book, Saving Democracy, a user's manual for every American. David Pepper is also author of Laboratories of Autocracy, arguably the most important book about the erosion of democracy in America, according to the political website Salon. Pepper has been featured on numerous leading cable television shows and in the Washington Post, New York Times, Time Magazine, The New Republic, and The New Yorker, and more. And he also is the author of 4 other political novels. The Wall Street Journal named David Pepper one of the best political thrill writers on the scene. Pepper earned his BA summa cum laude from Yale University and his JD from Yale Law School. A member of Phi Beta Kappa, he's a former elected official in Ohio and served as the chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party. A political activist, he also teaches election and voting rights as an adjunct professor in Cincinnati. A warm welcome. We're honored to have you this morning, David Pepper.
Thank you. Great to be with you today.
And great to have you. Also joining us this morning, Max Pizzaro, chief editor and co-founder of InsiderNJ, with his comments on today's issues. And always great to have you, Max Pizzaro.
Delighted to be here with the two of you. Thank you, Jessie.
David Pepper, between your undergraduate and law school years, you spent 3 years doing international work in St. Petersburg, Russia.
That's true. I sure did.
An assignment based out of a Washington, D.C. think tank. While there, you served as a research intern for the impressive Brzezinski for part of 1993, followed by several years as assistant director of a project providing technical assistance to the city of St. Petersburg. In that role, you interacted with international figures such as Kissinger, Paul Bremer, ambassadors, members of Congress, and Vladimir Putin, who was then vice mayor of St. Petersburg the same time you were there. Tell us your impression of Putin and what was he like?
Well, it's a really interesting couple of years. I joke that I'm probably one of the few Americans who interacted with Putin regularly who wasn't doing something really bad, really wrong. This was an era where we were working, remember Yeltsin and Clinton were working together. Yes. And my project was trying to help what was viewed as the most Western-minded city in Russia to undertake sort of economic and other types of reforms to transition out of the old Soviet system. And the mayor of St. Petersburg at the time was this very inspirational figure who helped defeat that coup that was attempted. He was viewed as potentially the next president. He was also the author of the Russian Constitution. And so my overall experience was a very positive one with people like the mayor. But his assistant mayor, who he assigned to be the liaison to my project, was this very serious man who didn't have nearly the personality of his boss and didn't give off the vibe of being sort of for democracy in the big sense that his boss did. And he was Vladimir Putin. He was sort of the guy who made the trains run on time. He was always sort of, a lot of the Russians I interacted with were very charismatic and somewhat larger than life and sort of enjoyable to be around. And Putin was sort of the opposite. He was very, like I said, very serious. He was more of an operator. He didn't give off the vibe like the others of having some sort of big picture democracy vision for the city or the country. And I always thought this is going to sound strange. It maybe says more about me than anything. I always thought, hey, how'd this guy ever become vice mayor? I mean, all these other people I'm meeting are very impressive and positive, and this guy's not. And obviously 6 years later, when he's named to be prime minister and clearly the heir to Yeltsin, I was shocked because of the many people I had met in St. Petersburg. He's not the one that anyone said would ever be anything. It was the others like the mayor, his name was Sobchak, who people thought might be president. So I knew something was amiss when the guy who was not the impressive one, when it came to at least sort of a democracy mindset, was the one who ultimately ascended to be president of the country.
How interesting. We'll never really know why he rose to the power that he did today. Max Pizzaro, you interviewed David Pepper for your Insider New Jersey column on his book, The People's House, in which Pepper examined the influence of Russia in an American presidential election at that time. Can you comment on this, Max?
Yes, well, I suspect, Jesse, that Mr. Putin did not read Mr. Pepper's Saving Democracy to employ that as a strategy for how he could get ahead in politics. Perhaps it had something to do with, I don't know, his ruthlessness. But I am curious. Yes, I'm curious, sir. What, in fact, do you think it is that beyond perhaps a certain reptilian glow that advanced Putin in that milieu?
Well, I think it's in hindsight, and I can't speak to all the details. I read enough since to know that he was up to his ears in some issues when I was working with him. I just didn't know it. Again, I was probably 22 years old, 23. And then his job a few years after I left St. Petersburg, I went to law school in 1996 and I stopped working there. He became sort of the head of the security spy services of Russia. And it was pretty clear that, you may remember mid to late 90s, the Yeltsin Act got very old. Everything felt unstable, chaotic. The economy wasn't doing well. Mm-hmm. And I think for the very reasons I thought Putin stood out in a negative way, he was serious-minded and very sober and not someone who felt like he was embracing democracy. I think oligarchs who thought Yeltsin's chaos was heading in the wrong direction thought this was a guy who would bring us, a different style and would essentially also do what they asked him to do. And so I think he kind of came through the back door of the security apparatus of the country, was installed at the very last minute, and then basically became the president. So I think they wanted the exact opposite of Yeltsin. They wanted someone who literally was going to be an operator and not some sort of bigger picture player. And I think that in the end, a lot of those oligarchs who put him into place, he ended up within a couple of years getting rid of. So I think they didn't take him as seriously as they should have, that they were putting into power someone who actually ultimately would take care of a lot of them within a couple of years, and now obviously single-handedly runs the country.
Sorry, Jessie, may I ask a quick follow-up?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. What's your assessment, Mr. Pepper, then of, I think you touched on it, but would it be fair to say that you think that Boris Yeltsin perhaps exhibited a little bit too much indiscipline and enabled because of his own perhaps leadership deficits, someone like Putin? Or I guess what I'm getting at is, what is your historical assessment of Yeltsin?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Yeltsin early on was a very heroic figure, but I think later on, I think you described it, the lack of discipline. He clearly was inebriated, I think, publicly. That chaos. I mean, the Russians are a proud people. I would have told you that then. And I think at some point they felt like he was humiliating the country and he was bringing the country down. And so they responded by putting into place the exact opposite, someone who went from undisciplined and unpredictable to someone who felt like a safety blanket. And obviously now we know, to a great fault, like that stability has come with so much worse. But I think it was a response to Yeltsin. Sort of the further it went, the more unwell and unfit he seemed personally to lead the country. And I think it's, in hindsight, it's also safe to say, and I saw it up close, I think we in the West underestimated just how challenging it was to transition into a market economy. And a lot of people in Russia in the mid-90s, seniors, families, felt enormous economic pain because of the attempt to transition. And so when they saw a leader who looked unfit because he was, again, publicly inebriated, undisciplined, they thought, we're going to do the exact opposite, trying to help things in our lives. And I think that helped usher in the Putin era. One story, if you have a second, that I've shared before,
yes,
and this
go
always
ahead.
made me sort of chuckle when I would watch Trump meet with Putin and think that sort of Putin and he were on an equal footing. I'll never forget 2 years in the meetings that I had in St. Petersburg with Putin, and I spoke a good deal of Russian, conversant, but we always had a translator, and he always had a translator, Putin did. And
yes.
and he never spoke a word of English. A couple of years into our meetings, I'll never forget, the translator was translating Putin into English, and she clearly made a mistake in a word that was a complicated word, not a simple word, and he corrected her in English.
Wow.
And that's when we all thought, oh my gosh, this guy has been listening to everything for 2 years and we didn't even know it. And I always think back to that story. You know, when I think about Donald Trump, I think in Stockholm, having the interpreter tear up the notes and all that. I think about my own meetings with Putin where we were supposed to be on the same page, and he never let us in on the fact that he knew everything we were saying. He understood it all. And it makes, and I think that entire time that Trump was meeting with Putin, he was with a very savvy figure who was using every bit of those meetings as leverage. Because I'll never forget, in the first book I've written that you just talked about, I actually have a scene much like that, where after a bunch of meetings, you realize the person knew your language the whole time. It's a little bit disconcerting. And I think that's, so he's a very dark and disturbing figure, but he's also, I think, quite savvy. And when he sees someone like Trump walking to meetings with him again and again, he obviously took advantage of that.
Well, that's quite a story, and that's very revealing. Before we review your timely books on saving our democracy, we'd like to get your take on the following. Donald Trump and his allies are pledging to remake the presidency if he's reelected again, giving him and the office more authority than it has ever had, and far more than the framers of the Constitution envisioned. Is this a formula for an authoritarian government, an established prescription for political disaster?
Yeah, it's obviously very dangerous, the things that we're reading about, the fact that people are helping him do this. I think Donald Trump is approaching, I think the main reason he ran, by the way, was to avoid being prosecuted. But now that he's still the favorite, and it's somewhat embarrassing that his own party can't see that when he's running largely to try and get out from under these indictments. But now that he's well ahead in the the Republican Party at least, I do think that he's not kidding when he says this is about vengeance. And I think he is thinking, well, in the first term, I had too many people who wouldn't go along with everything, who would question me, John Kelly or whoever else, or Milley or others. And so I do think that he is, Mike Pence even, I think he is thinking through, how do I come up with a group of people who will never say no to me? So I can weaponize everything from Bill Barr in the end. Another example, John, who's the guy with the mustache, John, I can't remember his name, national security advisor. I think he's thinking all those people betrayed him because they actually at some moment decided that he was going too far and they wouldn't go along, that he is trying to come up with a team of people who will put him over everything, including the Constitution, including our democracy. And he's still angry with the people who refuse to do that at the end of the day in his first term. So that is very scary. That is very scary. I mean, and it's clear that he will be, in a way that he didn't the first term, I think he will be testing and potentially running right through some of the final sort of protections of a rule of law democracy, which we've had all this time. So it should scare everybody. It should be getting a lot of attention. And by the way, one other thing that I think is really important, and it's easier for me to say this, but they need to do it. All those officials from, because if I'm a Democrat, if all we do is have Democrats say this stuff, a lot of people won't listen. We need the John Kellys and the General Millies and the Secretary of Defense when he was there. I can't remember his name now, but the one who was viewed as being sort of above doing what Trump asked, and Bill Barr, they all need to stand up in the next year, whether or not they like Joe Biden, and they need to say, this man is a danger, and his plan is a danger. And I hope they're patriots enough to do it, because some voters will be more swayed by them saying so than predictably what Democrats are going to say. So I hope enough of his former officials show enough patriotism to explain the risk that you're describing.
Well, you're certainly right, because Trump is pledging to punish and take revenge on anyone who he thinks was against him. And he also plans to gut the top layer of the executive branch bureaucracy and replace it with political appointees. But I want to just mention this. Bonnie Willis just this week indicated she now thinks her trial could be delayed until after the next presidential election. If so, and if Donald Trump is reelected, he is front runner with the Republicans right now, will he pardon everybody? Will he attempt to remain in office past his term? And will the whole case be tossed out the window and forgotten? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's the worry. Now, you can't pardon. The idea that he's pardoning himself and family members, I mean, that's such an abuse of the pardon power to begin with. I don't want to ever be normalized that doing that is okay. I mean, of course, the pardon power is for certain limited uses. People in the past have used the process. So it's outrageous that we even talk about it this way. But you bet, I mean, just like he issued pardons for Congress people, I guess he was asked to at least. Yeah, he would do that. Now, you can't pardon, state felonies. So he couldn't pardon state level trials that take place, but he certainly could pardon anyone involved in federal. And I think he's probably using that right now as best as he can behind the scenes. This is a theory. I don't want to act like I know anything here, but to hold out there. Now, a lot of people aren't listening to this if he is, that he would pardon people who might otherwise implicate him in these federal trials. But here's the thing. I know it's so frustrating that all these trials took so long to start. It's like we have a country whose system of criminal justice is not fit to protect itself from what happened. And I say this as a lawyer. I clerked for a federal court. There's something in our system that is so slow and moves like molasses in a way that we should have a better, more quick way to prevent someone who tried to overthrow our government from being able to run again before there's even a trial. I mean, it's honestly at some point outrageous that we can't get accountability or disqualification before the next election. So I really believe that whether or not Trump becomes president again will not come down to any of these trials. It will come down to the people of America deciding. I don't think the timing now maybe there's an indictment and maybe there's a conviction in one of them, but I don't think it'll play out in a way that determines the outcome. The outcome will be determined by the people of the United States deciding that it's just too much to have him get reelected. I actually wish that weren't the case. I actually think in this case, when you break the law like he did, he should be held accountable by the legal system and not only by the voters in the next election. My guess is countries around the world are shocked. The United States is not better at protecting itself from someone who tried to overthrow our government. But now it's going to be on the people. And the people of America are going to have to decide, will we reelect someone with all these horrific flaws and all the signals that he's sending about what he would do to our democracy if he ever got reelected.
Well,
but I think it's going to come down to the people and not a criminal justice process.
Well, your assessment is certainly right on, and I've got to go on a break. Joining me this morning, our esteemed guest, David Pepper, author of 6 dynamic political books, among them Laboratories of Autocracy and the companion book Saving Democracy, a must-read manual for every American. Also joining me today, Max Pizzaro, editor-in-chief and co-founder of Insider New Jersey. I'm Jessie Frees. We'll be right back.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Jessie Frees Show, brought to you by www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back. We're talking to our special guest today, the esteemed author, David Pepper. And before we leave the subject of Trump, what do you make of Trump's power grab plan? Is one-person rule, even elected one-person rule, compatible with Republican ideals? And how did this rule ever gain such a foothold in the United States? David?
You know, I think the answer is, and sadly we learned this in his first term, all the laws in the world still rely on people having, I wouldn't even call it courage, but character to abide by them. And so we have seen, I think, the crossing of norms and red lines again and again, because at key moments people have allowed it versus been whistleblowers or having said no. And I think Trump senses that if he can get enough people who will just go along with it, you can run through a whole lot of red lines and hope that it never catches up. Now, I still hope that at the end of the day, we have an independent military. We have ethics as lawyers that should still hold within the Department of Justice. We have a court system that should be independent. So my hope is in the end, even those worst plans get stopped at some level. But the 4 years of Donald Trump showed us that we can't rely on just the system itself. It comes down to people respecting our country, the republic form of government, the separation of powers and the rule of law enough to be willing to stand up and say, I'm sorry, I will not do that. I'm sorry, I will go public with it. Like they have, and Trump, I think, probably senses from his 4 years that he was pretty close on some things.
Yes.
And some of the reasons that it didn't happen were people who ultimately did say, I won't do that. And so, yeah, he's looking for enough people who will not stand up to see how far he can go. And I don't want to have this be a open question, and I worry it will be. Will the system hold if he's surrounded himself by hundreds or thousands of yes people? I don't think we as a country want to get close to put that to a test, because he came awfully close. I mean, a few things happened differently building into that election. A few things happened differently on January 6th, and I don't know where we would have gone. So it was close enough once, and if he doubles down and learns every terrible lesson he can learn from why he didn't succeed, yeah, it's a very scary proposition.
And
Mr.
loyalty.
Pepper.
Oh, go right ahead, Max.
Oh, sorry, Jessie. Thank you. Just a quick question. You talk about in such alarming fashion about how primitive perhaps some of our legal processes are as we attempt to prosecute Donald Trump. to what extent are we prepared to protect ourselves against cyber attacks? Because you've written about this extensively too in your novel, The People's House. So to what extent do you think that we truly are upgrading and contemporary in being able to fend off an attack, for example, by Russia on our process?
You know, I don't want to claim to be an expert on this. I mean, it's something that I worry about because one reality, and this is what I get into in The People's House. And so for those who don't know, The People's House was a novel I wrote years ago, my first book, and I was trying to expose the problem of gerrymandering and how bad it is, which is a big, real passion of mine and something I get into in these books I've written. But a book about gerrymandering is just such a bad idea for a novel that I quickly figured out, well, I'm going to add a Russian oligarch in who's the bad guy. And that's the book got famous because it was written before 2016. But sort of paralleled some of the actual real life events of Russia's involvement in past elections. But the worry I have is, like in The People's House, is elections are really, they're as decentralized in our country as education. It's local election boards that decide what equipment they use. It's funded in local budgets. It's not like there's a federal system of elections. It's all local based. So when you ask that question, how prepared are we? The answer is, well, it depends on how prepared thousands and thousands of counties are in running their own elections. And that's the thing that I think takes both statewide and federal leadership to make sure that in a very decentralized system running elections, are we making sure that all of these locally run elections and then the state level process that brings all those results together are running very many different systems with different levels of security. Are they all being done in a way that's safe? And I think my guess is the answer is in some places yes, in some places no. And this is where we need federal leaders, Department of Homeland Security and others to make sure, FBI and others, they are working with state and local leaders to make sure they're all doing it at least with a baseline of security. And I think the decentralized nature of our elections makes the answer to your question a lot harder, and this has been our history. This is how it's done. I'm not saying it's a bad thing overall, but I think it does make the job of securing elections harder if you have some kind of foreign operatives who somehow decide they're going to interfere somehow. So I'm sure, without being in the middle of that space myself, it's a never-ending challenge to make sure we are not allowing this stuff to happen.
It's one of the largest
sounds like
challenges
a pretty urgent
we have.
point. Sorry, Jesse. Thanks.
Yeah, it is.
That just sounds like a pretty urgent point, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I think that, you know, and one of the worries I have, and this is how I write that novel, is if you're a foreign actor, you know what I just said is true. I mean, they're not paying attention to this. And then we have a new risk, which is all the crazy disinformation, and you know, we are a country with an enormous military, so you can't really invade us. We have a country with an overall strong economy. You can't really tank our economy. You can cause damage by hacking and stuff, but our political system right now is the one that I think in many ways is our greatest vulnerability. It's hyper-partisan. It's decentralized in the way I've described. And I do think that if you're a foreign entity trying to mess with America, you know, the soft underbelly is more the politics than if you want to cause trouble, you can cause more trouble with our political weaknesses than doing flybys of our aircraft carriers, which aren't going to really do much. So that's my worry, is that just like I'm saying it, other foreign powers and Vladimir Putin, everyone else, they'll see this weakness. They clearly would see it, and it's something that frankly you can take advantage of. And that's why I think one of my messages in these books is, let's all be patriotic enough to shore up our system of politics and elections so it's very strong, so it doesn't become an invitation to other countries to meddle with us.
Well, we've got to go on a break. I hate to break this up right now, but we'll be right back. We're talking to our special guest today, the esteemed author, David Pepper, author of 6 dynamic political books, including Laboratories of Autocracy and Saving Democracy, 2 of the most important books about the erosion of democracy in America. We'll be right back with David Pepper and Max Pizzero, editor-in-chief and co-founder of Insider New Jersey. I'm Jessie Frees.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Jessie Frees Show, brought to you by www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back. We're talking to our special guest today, the esteemed author David Pepper. Before we leave this subject, what about the gag orders? Is Trump following them, and his name calling? His name calling is getting absolutely out of control, David Pepper.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to what I said earlier about our criminal justice system and our overall justice system. When you have people who are serial lawbreakers who just can't help themselves, when they see the system not enforcing its own orders, they just think, wow, I'll just keep doing it. I'll go further. And I honestly don't understand again, I don't mean to sound like I'm, some kind of Neanderthal, like I don't know anything about the law, but I think from a big picture standpoint, we need to have a system that brings more accountability to lawbreakers. And I think he has tested for long enough, and I think one of these judges needs to hold him accountable, because he will keep going as far as he needs to. This is his life pattern.
Mm-hmm.
If he's given an inch, he'll move in that inch. He'll move a foot. And, he knows what he did on January 6th. He's had never held accountability. Now he can criticize the judges, and he's criticizing the prosecutors and potential jurors and all of it. And at some point, you couldn't do this. I couldn't do this. Why is he getting to do it? And I honestly think there's got to be a moment where these judges stop saying, okay, I'm a dad of a young kid, so I learn this every day. At some point, you got to go from saying, if you do it one more time, you're going to be in trouble, to saying you're in trouble. You're going to be treated like anyone else who would violate clear court orders and restraining orders. I don't understand why it keeps going. It's sort of like he's the kid who keeps being told, the next time you're in real trouble. He's laughing about it.
It's always the next time.
And at some point, I know there's probably concern. Well, if we do it, then are we interfering with the election? Is that terrible? At some point, you just got to stop worrying about that. This is someone, and this is happening at many levels of politics. One of my theories in my books is that politicians at all levels are not facing any accountability for lawlessness, and that's why it keeps getting worse. People in politics who break the law or violate orders need to be held accountable like everybody else. And if that means that someone has to serve some time for contempt of court, it's got to happen. Because I think without that, people like Donald Trump, who've gotten away with this stuff their whole life, will always go further. They'll always keep testing. They are bullies, and they are used to running over people. And at some point, especially in a state or federal court, a judge needs to say, enough. You're in contempt. Pay the price.
But is there a judge that you can think of that can do this? So far,
yeah, the judges,
I'm not seeing any.
The judges he's in front of, I think. I don't know what else he needs to do to make it happen. I mean, it's time. It's past time. His whole life, I don't want to claim to be a Trump expert, but from a distance, he's gotten away with this stuff all the way through. He's a bully who sees when people don't stand up to him as his opening to do more. And it's time, especially in a court that would hold anyone else accountable for this stuff, it's time to do it there. And by the way, the judges he's in front of seem to be impressive judges. They're not like the one in Florida that he appointed. Okay, she's not going to do anything.
Cannon, she's
These
weak.
other ones, yeah, she's terrible. These other ones seem like they've got it in them, and it's time. I mean, no more long hearings about it. No more one more chances. He's intimidating witnesses. He's tainting the jury pool. He's insulting judges and their staff. It's all over the top, and it's time that he be held accountable, regardless of how it impacts an election. And again, this is kind of like common sense. The whole reason he's running was originally, remember, when he announced his reelection, no one was even paying attention. He was viewed as damaged goods. His entire run is to avoid the accountability that any other defendant in these cases would face. That's why he's doing it, or that's why he started it. Now I think he thinks he can win. So don't let him get away with that motivation by actually treating him differently, because he's a candidate. Treat him like anyone else who's violating order after order.
Your thoughts on that, Max? And is he running to stay out of jail with the 91 felonies that perhaps could get him in trouble?
Jesse, I suspect he's running because he thinks he can be president again. And I just think that Mr. Pepper's remarks are very well taken. And I think, Jesse, that it is very dangerous to have a demagogue spouting off angry statements about judges and prosecutors and the prosecutor's family. And we had an incident in the state where a murderer went after a judge and killed the judge's son. And so the idea that someone would stand at the head of an angry mob and invoke the family of a public official, to me, is obscene.
Yeah,
and that's all I can say about it.
I think now he thinks he can win, but I think the initial motive. You remember he announced for president only weeks after these indictments or the raids. I think the initial motivation, and this was, if you go back, it was a very odd, hurried announcement. No one was there. It was in one of his clubs. I think the initial motivation and the timing were driven a lot by these trials. I agree with you now, though. Now he's all in. He thinks he can win. And the Republican Party, I mean, kind of playing the fool, all rallies around a guy whose initial motivation was to avoid being prosecuted. But yeah, I agree with you now. And by the way, to your point, I was just with the husband of I won't mention names, of a state Supreme Court judge last night, not in Ohio, but another state, who said that, to your point, after they made a ruling that masks were allowed, they got death threats in their family.
Yes, they did.
It's gotten because of all the hostility and all the politics. So and that was because of the sort of COVID response. And so when you're having Trump saying what he's saying about judges and prosecutors and families and witnesses, it creates a hostility around the whole thing. And that's where a judge needs to step up and say, time's up. You're going to pay some accountability for once in your life.
And they certainly should. We've got to go on a break. We're talking to the esteemed David Pepper, writer, lawyer, political activist, and author of 6 political books, including Laboratories of Autocracy and Saving Democracy, a must-read for every American. And Max Pizzaro, editor-in-chief and co-founder of InsiderNJ. We'll be right back.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities, providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Jessie Frees Show, brought to you by www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back. We're talking to the esteemed David Pepper, writer, lawyer, political activist, and author of Laboratories of Autocracy and Saving Democracy, a must-read for Americans everywhere. In your informative book, Laboratories, you walk us through the hidden depth and intensity of the countrywide attack on democracy. In the final chapters of that book, you outline important steps, 30 or 35, necessary to fight back. And in your companion book, Saving Democracy, a user's manual for every American, you detail how we all can and must play a role in saving democracy at this fraught time. David Pepper, is there enough time?
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up this angle of what we're talking about, because the thing I hope your listeners take away from what we're talking about, what we're going to talk about, is there's very little anyone who's listening, including myself, can do about the Trump trials. It's not like we're on the jury. It's not like we can affect it. There's only so much we can all do about the presidential race. Obviously, we do not want Trump reelected. The message in my books, though, the nonfiction books, Saving Democracy and Laboratories of Autocracy, is that, believe it or not, most of the damage being done to our democracy actually is being done at the state level through gerrymandered state houses. That's where they're suppressing votes. That's where they're rigging the districts so the elections are predetermined, which give us the Jim Jordans and the Mike Johnsons, people who are in office and great power, having never been in real elections. And most of the damage to democracy that's happening in our country, most of the extremism that led to, for example, the end of Roe because of a law was passed in Mississippi to ban abortion, most of that damage is not happening in Congress. It wasn't done by Trump even. It's being done by state houses that no one can even name who these people are. And so the message in my book is the right-wing attack on democracy, the front line of it is not Congress, believe it or not. It's state houses. That's where they're banning abortion. That's where they're suppressing votes. They're banning water, gerrymandering. But the good news about that terrible reality is there's a lot more everyone can do about that. You can run for office. You can convince others to run for office. You can engage voters in the Ohio State House, in Virginia. And so the point is, it's not too late if we see the problem. If all we do is think a few swing states in presidential years, if only we win those, it'll save the day, then we're actually not going to win, because that's not enough, although we have to do that. We have to start focusing on the heart of democracy, which is shaped in the state houses of this country. And you know how we know that the other side knows this? They don't only focus on swing states, do they? A year after Biden won, they tried to take the New Jersey State House, didn't they? They actually took the Virginia State House. They don't just go for swing states and federal offices. They try and win state houses. And once they control a state house, they suppress the vote of the other side, like we've seen in Ohio, and they gerrymander so they can never lose. And then they push their extremist bills through. So the point of my books is to say, don't ever lose sight, as much as Trump is a danger, that the heart of their attack on democracy is at the state level, and we have to stop celebrating federal victories as if that's the whole battlefield. We will only win the battle for democracy if we start winning at the state level and not just the federal level. And it's at the state level where most of the damage they are doing is happening. And the good news, though, as I put in these books, is there's so many things you can do to make a difference as an individual at the state level that you really can't do when it comes to these larger elections that are so big, it's often beyond our control.
Excellent advice. And you go on to write that in state after state, as you just said, a group of our politicians, which are really factions, are rigging legislative districts to eliminate accountability and guaranteeing outcomes in its favor. And some of that rigging, though, violates state or federal law, but that doesn't matter to them. In fact, it's rewarded. So how did we ever reach this point? And Republicans have won a majority in the U.S. House of Representatives after 2022 due to the jury rigging. Would you comment on that for us?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the gerrymandering of the state houses is the heart of what they do, because almost everything they are doing on social issues, on what's taught in schools and their effort to ban and censor a woman's right to choose, all that is a state house issue. When Lindsey Graham, after Dobbs came down, said to Mitch McConnell, hey, let's do a national abortion ban at the Senate, you know what Mitch McConnell told him? No. We don't want to lose. And he said that knowing that all the states they control would do the bans on abortion. That's what's happened. So most of what they do, the school censorship, all the other stuff, it's the state level. That's their front line. And we have for too long focused on the Democratic side. We've sort of taken democracy for granted. We didn't see that state houses could undermine it. So we've been running around thinking that if all we do is win the 5 or 6 swing states for federal offices, we're winning. And the lesson is that's actually not a winning strategy. It's part of a winning strategy, but the bigger strategy is at the state house level. So what do we do about it? And here's the sad truth. We have been so trying in these places that everyone from the Speaker of the House now, this guy Mike Johnson, to Jim Jordan, to state house leaders especially, that we have an entire generation who spent their entire careers in political systems with zero accountability. Many of them, like 50% of the Tennessee Republicans who kicked out those 2 justices, were unopposed in last year's election. 50% of Georgia Republicans in their state house, the very people who banned water from the polls, unopposed in their last election. So and oftentimes they are voting for things that are lawless, but because no one runs against them, they're never held accountable. And so my main theory is, in the way we politically organize and in our system of laws, these are people who've spent an entire career in worlds with no accountability. So they keep acting the same way and getting away with it. We have to change how we respond to that to bring accountability back to them. We need to reform gerrymandering wherever we can, federal and state. And we also need to figure out that until we start running against these people, they will never change their bad behavior. They will always be more and more extreme because they only worry about the next primary. So we have to see who these people are, see why they're behaving that way, and change those conditions. So if all we do is keep only worrying about federal offices, they will keep doing exactly what they're doing, which is doing so much damage in state after state around the country.
Well, David Pepper, I have to go on a break, but I want to talk when we get back about election deniers. As you say, they're running for offices around the country, especially Carrie Lake, who wants to run as vice president under Trump. I don't know if she'll ever get there. Anyway, we'll be right back. We're talking to the esteemed David Pepper, writer, lawyer, political activist, and author of 6 political books, including Laboratories of Autocracy and Saving Democracy, a must-read for Americans everywhere, and Max Pizzaro, editor-in-chief and co-founder of InsiderNJ. I'm Jessie Frees. We'll be right back.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Jessie Frees Show, brought to you by www.InsiderNJ.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back. Despite all the doom and gloom we're seeing, there is a bright spot, and that's in Ohio, the state that just voted to support abortion rights into their state constitution. Will you talk about that, David Pepper?
Sure, and it's a bright spot even beyond Ohio. But yeah, we were so excited that for the last year, Republicans have done everything in their power to stop this from happening. But we overcame all of it, and by 57-43 voted. Again, this is a state that Trump won. We voted 57-43 to protect reproductive freedom. And the reason it's a bright spot is because this isn't the only one. Virginia last week, Democrats took back the state house. April, we won the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. November, election deniers running for Secretary of State all over the country and governor like Carrie Lake, like Mastriano, all lost. This is a year we're supposed to lose because we had the White House, and we won all across this country. And then last August, of course, Kansas voted 60-40 for reproductive freedom. So there's some good news and there's some lessons. The lessons are they are too extreme right now for America. The election denying, the post-Dobbs abortion bans, no exceptions. Oh, by the way, the other big thing, all around the country last week, these Moms of Liberty candidates running to ban books, they lost all over the country, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Iowa. So the good news is if we focus at this level of politics, which we have not been doing very well until lately, and we contrast ourselves to their extremism, we can win even in years that we're supposed to lose. So the lesson is, to anyone listening, get involved in that local stuff. Figure out how to make sure we're running everywhere. Make sure that the extremism on the other side is clear to people, because if they see it, they don't want it. Whether it's, again, election denying or some candidate who wants to turn their school board into some right-wing experiment. So we can win these things if we focus right, and we got to just keep right on doing this to extend this winning streak into next year as well.
Yes, and in your book, Saving Democracy, you challenge and guide each reader on how they can play a more active and effective role in lifting democracy. And over the course of the book, you construct in detail your own personal plan to fight for democracy. Will you give us some examples from your excellent list?
Sure. So if you're in a red state, I would say that your challenge in the next year, beginning now, is make sure you don't have so many uncontested races. Running for office right now is public service, even if you never win, because you're bringing accountability, you're bringing transparency. So if you're in a red state and you often feel like, well, it doesn't matter because the presidency will be determined there, your challenge is let's start running for these state house seats to make these places feel accountability for extremism. If you're in a state where there's a lot of voter suppression, like where I'm standing in Ohio, know that with the nonprofit activities you're involved with, let's say you're on the board of the local food bank or the homeless shelter, you could be using that nonprofit to register voters who are being kicked off the rolls by voter suppression or engage voters to vote early. There's so many things you could do. If you know the mayor of a town, and that mayor happens to be a Democrat, and they should want to do this, know that that mayor could use all the powers of City Hall to engage the people of their community to make sure they're registered. If you're seeing a school board lurch into book banning, organize and get to that school board meeting, because if you show up, they probably won't do it because they'll see how strong the opposition is. If you're in an area where it seems like you're concerned about election deniers taking over, go volunteer to be an elections official. We need more and more people with the backbone to serve in these positions. Steve Bannon is literally right now recruiting election deniers to be election officials. No joke. He does it all the time. We need to have patriots be elections officials. So this book, Saving Democracy, I go through in great detail all the ways that all of us individually can play a much bigger role in lifting democracy than we've ever imagined once we realize we're all on the front lines of that battle.
So there is hope. Do you want to add something to that, Max Pizzaro, very quickly?
I don't, Jesse. Thank you.
And my question to you is, how does the influence of money in politics affect the integrity of the democratic system, David Pepper?
I mean, it's very broken in a lot of places. I really worry that these gerrymandered state houses, as I described them, Ohio's and so many others, they basically aren't really about public service anymore. Public service has been corrupted into a form of private service. They take our public assets. This is what I write about in Laboratories of Autocracy. These state houses basically are the people in them are largely taking public assets, public funds, and giving them to private players. So in Ohio, we've seen our public schools drained of money, and that money's been given to for-profit schools. We've seen ratepayer money be used to bail out energy companies that led to the largest bribery scandal in Ohio history. We've seen rails not regulate like they should be, and that helped lead to that terrible rail accident in East Palestine. So it's money has taken these, in lack of accountability together, have basically turned many of America's state houses into places that serve private players by using public dollars. And what's happening as a result of that is a decline in public outcomes. That for-profit charter school scandal I mentioned, Ohio was ranked 5th in the nation 15 years ago in the quality of our public education. We're now down to the mid-20s. They've given away what was once a great strength so some of their donors can make some money. That's happening in many other ways. So the heart of these state houses is a corruption of public service into this very twisted private service using our public powers and public assets to do it. And I think we clean that up by reform if we can on the finance side. But again, first and foremost, accountability back in politics for those who are in these offices.
Absolutely. And I have 2 minutes left, but how has the role of misinformation and disinformation affected public trust in democratic processes?
Obviously, I think it's been the last couple of years, there's so few trusted sources of information anymore, and there's so much fractured information that has invited disinformation, all the social media, all the other things. And I think it's all been, and people sort of only associating with the media outlets they agree with. So we've created sort of multiple worlds, and that again allows for all sorts of disinformation, splintered views. And by the way, I get into this in my book. I mean, one of the things this calls for is for everyday citizens to take their role seriously, that they have a network of people who listen to them, who trust them. And so if you're paying attention and you feel like you're keeping up on things, share with your Facebook page, share with your friends, write letters to the editor, get the word out there, because you're trusted among those who know you, and your words actually could break through some of the disinformation people you know may otherwise get. So there's a problem. We can name a lot of them, but I also want to come up with, there's a way to address all this, and we just can't give up when we see it. There's some agency we can all play in fighting back.
Great advice. And unfortunately, our time has come to a close, and we thank our political guest this morning, David Pepper, for your most informative, enlightening views on saving our democracy. And we urge everyone to get a copy of your book, a must-read for Americans everywhere. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Take care.
And thanks, Max Pizzaro, editor-in-chief and co-founder of Insider New Jersey, for your views today.
Thank you so much, Jesse.
Stay tuned for Julie Briggs and her riveting political roundtable coming up next. I'm Jessie Frees. Good day.